Welcome to Hear Her Story podcast, produced by the Women in Manufacturing Association. My name is Allison Graylis, founder and president of the Women in Manufacturing Association, and we're thrilled that you joined us for episode 24 of our podcast series. Today, I'm thrilled to have join us Laura Wilde, Senior Director, Quality and Mission Assurance with Aerojet Rocketdyne. Laura has had a long career in manufacturing, and I'm excited to have a conversation with her and to have her hear her story and have her share her story on today's recording. Welcome, Laura.
Good morning, Allison.
So, Laura, lots of women, and it seems to be a common thread as we've had our conversations on Hear Her Story, many women end up in manufacturing careers in all different ways. It's not one sight line from, education or early interest to a manufacturing career. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, and particularly we could start maybe with a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what were some of those early influences that you had as a young woman, and then ultimately we can kind of talk through how you got into manufacturing.
Yeah, sure, Allison. So I grew up here in Northeast Ohio, pretty much for my entire life, a short stint in Indianapolis when I was first born, and really had an amazing set of parents who really encouraged me to thrive in whatever was inspiring me at the moment. I would definitely say my journey for women in manufacturing was, inspired by my mother. At an early age, there was never allowed to be an excuse for not being able to do something because I was a girl. I have a vivid memory of about 7-year-old being handed a hammer and told we're going to go tear down the wall in the bedroom. We always worked together to try to understand that maybe we couldn't do things the same way as others, but we could get something done, if we put some intuition into it and tried to make sure we did the process in a way that, was safe and encouraged. I did grow up on a small farm. I think that too played a part in ultimately landing in manufacturing. It gives you a certain amount of grit that you have to be able to every day go out there and do what's required, no matter what. From there, really, it came from loving the way things are made. I think that's why women in manufacturing is such an interesting concept, is because it's about creativity, right? Ultimately, manufacturing is making a product, no matter what it is. And even in my youth, I was always intrigued by how the toy was made, how this thing worked. Ultimately, that inspiration led me towards a career embedded in engineering. But for me at that young age, it was just like tearing apart things. I always found that I was doing that. I always loved Legos and those types of things. So I think that was the very beginning journeys. And again, just having two parents that really allowed me the opportunity to explore whatever I was interested in at the time. And they were very supportive of that. And again, my mom in particular, just really making sure that I never used an excuse of I was a woman, so I couldn't do something. Just maybe had to do it differently, but was always able to accomplish it in one fashion or another.
That's great. You had that early encouragement, and sadly, not all women have that.
So very, very true.
And I had that as well. And I don't know what your mom's background was. Mine, I think she grew up in an era where in the 1950s, where women had lots of restrictions on them. So if she had 2 daughters and a son, her encouragement was often, why not try it? You can do this. And even the craziest of concepts and ideas, she supported. Not, of course, if they were unsafe, she did not support them. But as long as they were safe and done smartly, she was supportive. So as you grew up on this farm in Ohio, how did you had this interest in kind of fixing things and how it's made? How did that then translate into what you pursued educationally? And, were those things formed by those early interests?
Yeah, great question, Allison. So I think like many, I hit high school and was in a position of not really knowing what I wanted to do. Of course, I had aspirations in my youth, being a teacher, an archaeologist, a lawyer, went through the normal slew of lists that many do. But once I hit high school, I had an aptitude for math and a love for science is the way I always put it. And, you put those two things together, even as I say it, I'm sure everyone listening today goes, oh, engineering. And really, that's where the drive was. So I ultimately made the decision to pursue an education in engineering. And it's really led well into my manufacturing career as well. So I, after high school, attended university and went for engineering. I worked full-time pretty much during my entire college career to pay for college. Worked in retail for that time period, so about 3 to 4 years, and quite frankly, experienced a horrible Christmas yet again in the retail industry and swore I would never work another Christmas in retail. And I was at the point in my college education where it was time to start looking for internships, co-ops, those types of things. And I opened the newspaper, just dating myself a little bit. Can't believe we all used to look for jobs in the newspaper, and found a local organization that had a position that was really entry level and fit well. And they were definitely looking for people in that kind of stage in life with their college education, and applied to just one job and got that one job within 2 months later, starting my manufacturing journey then.
Wow. So what was that first job, or what did it look like day one, or when you first entered manufacturing?
Oh, I love this story. This is probably one of my favorite parts of my manufacturing journey. So keep in mind, coming from retail, so, very different environment, moving to manufacturing. I remember I started the day after Memorial Day. It was third shift manufacturing. I had a uniform. I walked in with my safety shoes, having no idea what I was getting myself into. I walked in as the only woman on the shift with about 20 other gentlemen, and didn't have any idea what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. And that's really, to me, the inspiration behind why I love it so much. I was able to figure it out. I ultimately, for the first, I think year or so of my career, actually ran a line. I was in manufacturing on the floor, driving a fork truck, trying to move heavy things around, really kind of one of the first women on that journey in that organization. And quite frankly, I love it. I reflect on that moment all the time, because it helped me understand what needed to change, what was an amazing organization. It helped me understand how learning is part of who I am. And I really enjoy the process of learning, and ultimately, growing my career at that organization.
So started at a very early age, one of just a single female on your shift. So that must have been daunting. And how did you rise from there in your career? So you obviously must have liked what you were doing in that first shift, or saw things that you could see translate into a future career. How did you navigate from there to, I know it's, not always probably by design, but how did you navigate from there to where you ended up present day?
So I really had a passion for it. And I think that showed. I had an opportunity pretty much every 2 or 3 years along the way to have a promotion in one way or another. So at first it was third shift leader. And then I was a move into quality, which I've been in quality for the majority of my career, which I love, by the way. That's a whole nother conversation and topic, I guess. But had the opportunity to thrive in each promotion along the way, and then was identified pretty early on in the organization as somebody as a high potential who had even future growth beyond that. I will always say I had amazing mentors, 2 to 3 in particular, that just really helped me understand how to be successful, how to grow in an organization, how to treat others with respect and kindness, and grow that throughout my career. So I was able to, over the next 15 years, grow throughout the organization to opportunities that ultimately led to larger leadership positions, not only at my facility, but internationally as well. I think the opportunity and willingness to travel has played well into my career as it's moved forward. I still to this day travel very significantly, and I really actually enjoy it quite a bit. But I think being willing to be flexible, willing to learn, again, treating people with kindness and respect, had ultimately played into the success that I had, and really ultimately, quality management throughout my career.
So you mentioned your passion around quality, and I know that, that's an area where it can be very rewarding and also exciting. And there's been lots of changes in quality systems, I'm sure, and tools used to enforce and to create quality systems within organizations. So how did that passion around quality systems and quality generally spark with you? And how does that translate into, again, this love of your manufacturing career?
I really think they play hand in hand. To me, the fundamental purpose of a quality organization in any company is the opportunity to improve a process, right? So if you go back to what I mentioned in my youth, I love processes, the way things are put together, the way that they're made. And then ultimately, how do you make those processes even better? So whether that's at the root, the fundamental, there's an issue and there is a problem that needs solved with the performance of a product, or more forward facing, and we're talking lean, those types of things that are continuous improvements that are driving improvement before there's ever even a problem. So there's 2 legs to that, and both just completely I embrace, because I think of how important they are and I really appreciate them. And that's just part of who I am. That's in my DNA. I always use the analogy that even after my family and I've come back from a vacation, the first thing I say, and we're getting in the car, headed back to the airport to head home, is what could have been better? And then that's vacation, right? So I'm always in the look for how do you do something better to ultimately, improve those results time and time again. It's hard in quality, especially in manufacturing, because I always will say, 9 out of 10 times when somebody's giving you a phone call in quality, it's usually to tell you that there's a problem and how are we going to fix it? And really, it takes a certain personality to be successful in that environment, because you have to be willing to not see it as a problem, but truly see it as an opportunity for improvement. Because quite often it really is, oh my gosh, we have a situation and we have to resolve it quickly. So you have to go into it with patience, and you have to be willing to see it for what it is, which is really, it's a chance to make the organization better. And that's why I think it's really been a good fit for me when it comes to manufacturing. I would also share that for me, quality is just such a partnership with operations or manufacturing or whatever you may call it at your particular organization. And that goes back to my roots. I'm on the floor a lot. There is nothing better than putting on my safety glasses and my safety shoes and heading out there and working on the floor with the team. And in quality, I'm afforded the opportunity to do that. Maybe not as much as if I were in operations, but still that chance to really see the product, seeing it produced by the team that's just doing amazing things.
And I love your mindset. And I think that mantra of, it's not about looking at the problem, it's how can we improve processes and how can we make the organization better? And I think that's the right approach. That's you're in a tough role. You're often, as you said, getting those calls, something's not working and something's broken. How do we fix it? And ultimately it's going to make things operationally more productive and hopefully the company more profitable based on improvement of processes. So as you look at your career in manufacturing, you mentioned that first position you had, that you were one of just a small crew at that third shift in company. Hopefully the landscape has changed in terms of numbers of women in manufacturing that you're working with, and I'm sure many that you've mentored and led. What have been some challenges that you've experienced along the trajectory of your career, and have there been any unique challenges because of your gender?
It is still a journey. I wish the numbers were better than they are. It's still an opportunity, I think, for the whole manufacturing industry as a whole. Obviously, why women in manufacturing exists, right? There is oftentimes, I am the only woman in the room throughout my career. That didn't just stop on day one, third shift manufacturing. More often than not, I am oftentimes the only woman in the room. So it is a challenge, but it's one that I really embrace because I think it multiplies, right? If you can take it from being 1 to 2, 2 to 4, it's just such a force. And it's fantastic to have seen that evolution over the last 20 years. I would say initially at the entry level, there was a lot of complexity with moving things, to be quite honest with you. But what I have seen is that it's no longer about the fact that I was a woman 20 years ago and trying to move something that was heavy. Now it's about safety as a whole, and that no one should be moving something that heavy. It's not just being a woman that made it a challenge, that none of us should have been trying to move something that was over 100 pounds or whatever the case may be. So there was an initial challenge when it came to some physical things, trying to lift something up high, moving it around. But that changed over time and was fantastic. I really embraced that, the change that the organization went through, not only for myself, but other women in the organization. And again, just frankly, the safety of everyone. There have been times where my personality, who I am, again, going back to that kind, respectful type of leadership style, has been challenged in a very male, kind of bang the table kind of environment. But I've learned to embrace that as well, right? You have to explain oftentimes that there is multiple ways to lead, and that diversity is what makes us be successful. And that's one of the greatest changes I've really loved to see over my career journey, is that people are starting to see that and realize that there isn't just one leadership style. There's multiple leadership styles. And, I'm very collaborative. I enjoy seeing people grow. I'm a huge advocate of mentoring in my own career, for mentoring for others and seeing them grow in their careers. So having the support to respect those different leadership styles has been, an absolute journey throughout my career.
I joined an apprenticeship program instead of jumping right into a job because I wanted to continue my education. In college, I completed 2 certificate programs, and that put me halfway to a degree, and I was looking for a way to finish that degree. And the apprenticeship program gave me that because they pay for my schooling while I'm also working.
Sarah Langvin with Trump is one of the many successful women who have gone through a registered apprenticeship program. These programs are proven to attract and retain a strong, solid workforce.
I would 100% recommend an apprenticeship program to other women. I've met so many amazing people and done so many fantastic things, and it's been very beneficial to start my career in this way.
To find out how you can start a registered apprenticeship program at your company or to join a program, log on to womeninmanufacturing.org, keywords registered apprenticeship programs.
We often talk about women who are often faced with lots of challenges throughout their career, many of which come to a certain point age-wise where they decide they want to have children, that they want to have kind of a journey there as well with being a parent and caregiver, but at the same time have interest in continuing a career. We also support you around our moms in manufacturing community to try to provide support, because we know that can be a difficult time as people are making tough decisions as they're trying to balance and to integrate personal demands and professional demands. As a mom, I know of 2 girls. How has that been for you, or how did you navigate kind of growing your career at the same time as growing your family?
Yeah, great question. And I know so many women, this is just such an important topic. So I want to spend some time on it. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. And I will say it is still to this day the most rewarding part of my journey. I adore my daughters. They have inspired me to be a better person. And I'm so grateful that, we embarked on that journey 20 plus years ago now. It was hard, especially at the beginning, because I knew that for me personally, I couldn't stay home. I was a better mom for going into work. And I think everyone has their own journey and they need that self-reflection to understand who they are and then make that decision for themselves. So I knew I wanted to be a mom, but I also knew I wanted to be a working mother. So at the very beginning, I spent a lot of time researching and understanding what are our options. My husband and I actually at the time worked at the same organization. So how could we share shifts, split things up to make sure that we had the best financial decision, let's be honest, for ourselves. We were all set to, once I was off maternity leave, to put our first daughter in daycare. But she threw us a curve and spent the first several weeks of her life in the NICU, and then ultimately was not allowed to go into daycare for quite some time. So we had to move things around again, and we had to be flexible. We had to be understanding of the situation. And we had to make sacrifices, right? Or we had to make decisions to ensure our long-term success as a family. So, the new car that I wanted, it got put on hold. We did other things to make sure we were successful. So early on in their youth, we had them in daycare. I always share the story, and I'm sure this is similar to various other working mothers. The hardest part of the day, every day, was drop off, right? My youngest, man, she would stand at that window and beat on the window when I would leave, saying I was abandoning her, right? Leaving her. So that was always a hard thing to do every day. But ultimately, when my husband would go to pick her up, she'd be screaming not to leave. So, it came full circle. After that, as they entered into grade school, we just really did a lot of balancing with our shifts, which was fantastic. So I would drop off, my husband would pick up. And then my husband has been terribly supportive the entire journey of my career. Having spoken with other people in the Women in Manufacturing organization, I know that can be a kind of a common theme at times. I have a partner that supports me in everything that I do, and we make decisions together and we work together to be successful. So he really played a huge part in my daughter's lives, helping raise them and soccer coach, all those wonderful things. So we embarked on that journey together and really focused on what was our long-term goals for being parents and raising, we always say confident, beautiful, intelligent young women. And I think we've really achieved that thus far. So it was really, really hard. After a hard day at work and you're coming home to a screaming toddler, not easy. Or a frantic teenager, right? There's the whole spectrum in those 20 years. But I think at the end of the day, I love the decision that I made, and I would never, ever change it because it was hard, but it was worth it.
Yeah, those drop-offs were horrible. You talk about trauma, and that's trauma. And I think as well, because we as parents, we often are questioning, am I doing the right thing? is this the right thing I'm supposed to be doing? Is this a bad decision? I think so often women, even more, we second guess ourselves, and it's tough. And with so many pressures on being best parent, being best employee, I think we all set that bar high for ourselves. So it's tough when we think we're failing on both sides, or you're failing on one side and maybe not on the other. It's tough. And you mentioned the travel piece. That's something that comes up in conversation a lot with women in our industry and members that I've talked to, is that that's often one of those barriers for women to rise, is that often it's these global opportunities or these expat opportunities that are given. And, so often women are assumed that they don't want to take those because they might be in that stage of their life where they're having kids, or where, they have more complexity at home. And did you see that in your career as well, or from kind of early stage, were you given those opportunities to take assignments and to travel and to have those experiences?
In addition to the daycare, as we alluded to, my infrastructure of support here locally has been consistent. So I have parents that are there to support and fill in the gaps as needed. So relative to the travel question, when the girls were younger, let's call it elementary school, my husband and I were both traveling, but at different times. So it was well balanced. We really just were able to work through it with support locally from my mother. But then in addition to that, we always just tried to take advantage, both of us, when there was an opportunity to go and learn something new through just short travel, right? To go to a supplier, go to a customer. Ultimately, as they started to get older, I had more opportunities to travel and took advantage of those. So we really just, again, leveraged the support system that we had, but then also just planned. I'm a huge planner. Doesn't probably come to a huge surprise, but I always have a plan. So I'm always trying to look forward when it comes to those travel opportunities. And when you can plan it, it definitely makes a big impact. So what I always encourage organizations when they're talking about this conversation is, if you can give somebody 2 weeks notice, they can usually figure out a childcare solution. It's when you're asking somebody to pack their bag tonight and leave tomorrow morning that it becomes a little bit more difficult. And that's not just about being a woman, that's about being a parent.
Right.
I think we sometimes, want to assume that the dad can do the same thing, and he can't. He has responsibilities for childcare just as much as the woman does. So there's some opportunities there, I think, for organizations to be a little bit more understanding of the travel concept. For me, it's just really been about, as they've gotten older, I travel more and more. And as I reflect back on my parenting style, I've always believed that you sit down and take the time with them when they need the time. It's not about being there all the time. It's about making sure the moments count. And that doesn't mean you have to be going and doing something fun. I can't tell you how often for us, those moments are just sitting on the couch together, maybe scrolling through their phones, just being together. But that's what's important for myself and my children, is that when the moments happen, is that they matter. And it doesn't have to be every single day. So that's how I kind of balance the parenthood and the traveling journey together.
That's great advice. And I totally echo that. I think that it's that being present and being available and being there with kids. And what's funny is, years ago, I remember having dinner with a girlfriend whose kids are about 10 years older than mine and now out of college, and, adults. And she said to me, I'm thinking of taking, and she'd always worked professionally as I had, but she said, I'm thinking of taking a pause or step back from work for 4 years or so while my kids are teenagers. And I want to be home when they're coming home with big life problems and big issues. And it's funny because we fret so much when kids are babies, as you talked about those horrific drop-offs. And we think about this horrible this impact that we're having on their lives when they're babies, when, in all honesty, they don't remember many of those years. And it's sad that because of our trajectories professionally, so often some of our busiest times when we're in our 40s and such, and late 30s, is when kids are teenagers. And so it's funny because I was so flabbergasted when she said this. Why would your kids need you more when they're teens? And now having 2 teens, I'm like, oh, I get it. They do need you more for that guidance, for, as you said, sitting on the couch, even if their faces are buried in phones, just to be there and present and available for conversations and for guidance and just support generally.
Having teenagers, it's definitely that you're there to listen when they need it, right? So I've tried very hard with the traveling, whether home or not home, whatever the case may be, that if I get that phone call or I get that cryptic text, right, when you can just kind of tell something's off, It becomes very important to ensure that I, within the next couple of hours, have had that touch point with them to check in. What do you need? How can I help? What's going on with school? I always just kind of want to hear that dialogue from them. And I think you're really right that we spend so much time when they're little, but when they're older is almost more impactful that you're there and present in those moments with them.
So I know you love to travel. You mentioned travel professionally, and you shared with me and inspired me to be a better planner as I make family trip plans and such. So if you had to pick, what are maybe your top 2 places you visited that you would recommend to others to do a family trip or personal trip? Are there any that stick out as some memorable or great trips that you or your family have taken?
So I'll dial it back just a little bit. One of the things that I'm just extremely passionate about is, I always call it experiences. I love trying new things, seeing new places. It's what feeds my soul. It's really just a fantastic part of what I love to do. So part of that has been ensuring that myself and my family have the opportunity to travel, and that it is focused on experiences and less on things. So roughly 15-ish years ago, we decided as a family that every Christmas we travel. We kind of really have stepped away from the traditional Christmas model and elect to travel every year. So we have gotten to go to some really amazing places. My girls have now gone to 18 different countries. I would say our first family, we all agree, I guess is the way I should put it, is Iceland was an amazing adventure. And we had the opportunity to go to Iceland roughly 4 to 5 years ago, spend 10 days there, and just had an epic journey. Beautiful landscapes that I can't even put into words, scenery that you just can't even fathom, that literally would change every 15 minutes as you drove the island, a culture of really accepting individuals that you could touch and see and feel and taste. It was just a sensory explosion. So definitely one of our favorite places. I'd love to go back. We went in the summer, so daylight pretty much 24/7. I do need to go back in the winter to have the opportunity to see the Northern Lights, but that's always our number one stop for sure. Wow, the second one, it's always harder. I always know my first. The second one would probably just be Germany as a whole. I've had the opportunity to go to Germany quite frequently for work, and then also as a family. And just the culture and the experience really resonates with my own German heritage, but just the food, the music, the festivals, it's an amazing place. But it's always tied with Aruba. We have a soft spot in our heart for Aruba. That's just a great place to go. Obviously, it's December in Ohio, so to go someplace warm is always a great opportunity. But we really enjoyed Aruba a couple of years ago as well. But I will share, Allison, for us, it doesn't even have to be that. Sometimes, when they were younger, it was about grabbing a bag of board games and trying a local winery, a local brewery, trying a new restaurant, a new park. It's all about that experience.
Well, you inspire me. My kids and I, we've traveled over the years, and I love that idea of, it doesn't even have to be travel. It can be experience. It can be just spending time together as a family is so important. And I'll have to get your guidance offline on your Iceland trip, because that's been on my bucket list of places to go. And I've only heard but wonderful things. So, as we wrap up our conversations with our guests and hear her story, we often like to also ask a few other questions and get your guidance for kind of future and current generations of women in industry. I also personally know that you're an avid reader. So we often like to ask, what is your favorite book and or current book that you just read that you might recommend to others?
Sure. So favorite book, I will always tell you that and everyone always smiles, but the Harry Potter series is my favorite book. I just think the character development and the storyline is fantastic. I know it's considered youth novel, but for me, it's a fantastically written series. So always my favorite, number one. Most recently read House of Breath and Sky by Sarah J. Maas. I typically read 60 to 70 books a year. So I always have a new book. I'm always on the journey looking for new books. There's always something new. I probably have about 12 to 14 books in my queue right now. Love reading. So I think that goes back to my love of learning. Typically it's fiction, some nonfiction as well, but typically I focus on fiction. For me, it's kind of my end of the day, just turn my brain off opportunity. So
I'll have to get you as a resource within our organization to be maybe a book recommender with the volume that you read. Do you do a book, or are you doing Kindle or a device?
It's Kindle. With how much I travel, every inch in that suitcase is valuable. So with how many books I go through, I don't have enough space in my suitcase for that. So definitely an e-reader. So my Kindle.
And then in terms of guidance, there's obviously a growing number of women in manufacturing in all different roles and responsibilities. So what would you recommend with some years of experience under your belt to either current women in manufacturing careers or future women in manufacturing careers? What advice would you give them?
First, I encourage women to first consider manufacturing. I think so often at the beginning of your journey, or maybe in the midst of your journey when you're looking for something new, women don't think about manufacturing. They don't think it's potentially a fit for them. And I would say that is completely not true. It's been a fantastic opportunity for me. I wouldn't want to work in any other industry. I don't think I could work in education and medicine or any of those other industries that are out there. I have great friends that are in both, but it's just not for me. I would say as you embark in that opportunity in manufacturing, you are open to learning new things because you're going to have to learn. I guess that's true in any career, but in manufacturing, you're going to have to learn how that thing is made and how is that impacting what you're doing. Then I would also encourage you to have a network of both women and men, and that you use that network to explore what's important to you and really self-reflect. I say this to everyone, though, that I think it's really important that you take a pause, an intentional pause, and understand what you want to do with your life and how do you want to grow. And then you build a network of people around you that helps support that opportunity for growth. I had fantastic mentors. I would not be where I'm at today without those folks. Some came to me, and in other cases, I went to them and I said, I need your help. This is what I want to do. How do I get there? Help share your story with me so that I can be successful. And then as I've grown my career, it's doing the reverse, right? Paying it forward. So now it's mentoring other individuals and helping them grow in their journey in their career. I think when it comes to manufacturing, it's just such an important part of our economy. And to see what we can make is just a fantastic journey and how it's made, and then taking that and improving it. So I encourage people to really embrace that creative spirit that really is manufacturing, that it really drives who we are, I think. And it can really, we've made amazing things, right? Every time I learn how something's made, I'm just fascinated. I feel like that 7-year-old girl again. And I just think it's a really great place to grow your careers in manufacturing.
Well, great advice, great inspiration, Laura. And obviously, us as an organization, we hope year-round more people are inspired to explore manufacturing career and investigate if it can be a great fit for them and their personal passion. So thanks so much for having a conversation with me today. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and so happy to have you as part of our organization and also our board of directors. So thanks for all that you do to support women in this industry, and thanks for having a conversation today.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I just want to say thank you for Women in Manufacturing. I came upon that organization, I think now 4 or 5 years ago. It's helped me build my network that I just alluded to, but what an inspirational group with such great growth over the last several years, and a great tool for us all to use to grow our careers in manufacturing. So we appreciate everything that you and the team are doing.
Well, thank you, Laura.
Thank you for listening to Hear Her Story, a podcast produced by the Women in Manufacturing Association. Be sure to share, review, and subscribe to Hear Her Story on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen.